Hello, good evening. It's good afternoon, not even yet. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very proud of our new event hall, and I hope that you appreciate our new consulate. We're very proud of it. We just moved a year ago. Was it a year ago? Exactly a year ago. And this enables us, these new facilities enable us to host people and to open and invite groups here. And I believe that the diplomats have to be connected, first of all, to the country in which they operate and to the community that surrounds them. We Israeli diplomats are very lucky to have such a community to support us here in Canada, and particularly here in Toronto. And a lot has been already said about the generosity of this community and the commitment and the close link to Israel on a personal level. This is very important. There are so many members of this community who have relatives in Israel, friends. They travel, they visit Israel regularly, they volunteer, they support initiatives that have to do with Israel here in Canada and back home. And it's heartwarming to see that. This is not something that we Israeli diplomats take for granted. In many countries in which there are hardly any functioning Jewish communities, we see the fundamental, the dramatic difference in the level of our diplomatic activity. In the case of Canada is indeed a unique case. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'm very glad to host the Israel Guide Dog Center and many representatives here, and thank you for the introduction. We're marking this month Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month in Canada. I'm full of respect to the way that things are conducted here in Canada, the fact that so much attention is given to diversity, different sectors in Canadian society. And again, it brings me back to the Jewish community and to members of this community who are involved in so many aspects of activity here in Canada. Several months ago, we met with Noah. He came to the consulate. We discussed cooperation, and he spoke about his organization. And then Eyal Lesh, where is he? Oh, there he is. Standing right there. Came to the consulate again, and we heard about the wonderful activity of the organization. And what touched me personally was the fact that he discussed the volunteer work of students in Israel, university students, and how they adopt puppies and how they train them and how they become attached to the puppies, and after a year or so they have to give them and to send them away, and knowing that they did what everything in their ability to teach them well and to raise them well and to train them, and then they move on to the next puppy. It takes a lot of commitment, and it's really heartwarming to see that. So I have to tell you one word about what is called classic diplomacy. And this is what usually comes to mind when people think about diplomacy. They think about diplomatic missions, and they think about receptions and conversations that are conducted in hushed tones behind closed doors. This is the image of diplomats and how they operate. And things like that are conducted this way on the governmental level. There is no question about it. But I believe that relations between countries are determined not only on the governmental level. We create the necessary infrastructure when it comes to agreements, when it comes to statements, official statements that are released. But at a certain point, we have to take a step back. And we have to leave the floor to civil society, to organizations such as this one and many others who operate. I saw that when I was director of the Department for Palestinian Affairs, and I saw sometimes the limits of what is called classic diplomacy and the great power that is given to civil society, to NGOs, to organizations that actually bring people together and build bridges between cultures and between nations. I would like to say one thing about the power of this organization in particular. As you know, military service in Israel is mandatory. We have a relatively high number of veterans. Many of them are wounded veterans in Israel. And there are others who cope with disabilities in Israel exactly as they are in Canada. And the most important thing for all of us and I'm sure you'd agree with me, is the need to preserve our independence, to be independent and to be self-sufficient. I have to tell you about an event that was organized by Bet Lochem only a few days ago. I attended that event, and there were several Israeli veterans who attended that event. They were severely wounded, some of them suffered from PTSD, and they somehow found the strength to get up and to move on. And they have families, and they function well, and they work and contribute to society. Very, very impressive people. And we owe them so much. We have owed them so much. But not only veterans have to deal with the many challenges, also children and teenagers, many other adults in Israel have to deal with disabilities, with blindness, and to maintain this independence that is so important, not only in Israel, but of course around the world. So I'm glad to see that, to host this event here at the Consulate. We're going to hear about the activity of the organization. We're going to listen to some wonderful music and celebrate Yom Yerushalayim. We marked Yom Yerushalayim this weekend. And I would like all of you to, first of all, keep us in mind, follow us on social media. If you're looking for information about Israel, we're very active on Twitter and Facebook. This is my little commercial of the Consulate. I encourage you to do that if you haven't done it this far. And come and visit us again. Come and visit us again. There will be more events that will be organized in this hall. Please join me in welcoming Noach Brown, founder of the Israel Guide Dog Center, and Elia Blonek and his dog, Glenn.